Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind, and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into the mysterious idea of parallel universes, and even more curiously, the suggestion that some of them might already be brushing against our own. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the multiverse together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Let's start not with equations or hypotheses, but with something smaller, something familiar. You're standing in a grocery store aisle. In your left hand is a box of cinnamon cereal. In your right, something chocolatey and indulgent. You hesitate. You imagine the taste, the crunch, maybe the guilt, and then, without much fanfare, you choose. One box goes back on the shelf. The other rides in your cart. You move on. Seems like nothing. But now imagine, just for a moment, that the other version of you, the one who chose differently, didn't disappear. That somewhere, somehow, another reality unfolded. One where the chocolate cereal made it home, and your morning tomorrow will taste ever so slightly sweeter. It's a small difference. A tiny ripple. But multiply this across every decision, every fork in every road, every missed train, every unread message, every door you walked through or didn't. And suddenly, it's not just one life that branches, it's an entire forest of possibilities. This, in a whisper, is the multiverse. Now, the multiverse isn't just science fiction, though it does make for wonderful stories. It's an idea that lives at the curious intersection of quantum physics, cosmology, and imagination. Some scientists believe it's not only possible but perhaps even necessary, that the universe we see, vast as it is, may be just one of countless others, all part of a much larger and stranger reality we can barely begin to glimpse. It's not an easy idea to hold in your mind, especially late at night. Our brains are built for a world of solid ground and simple cause and effect, a world where the sun rises in the east and your socks stay in the drawer you put them in. But even that simple world, as quantum physics reminds us, is more slippery than it seems. Particles don't always behave. Light is sometimes a wave, sometimes not. And at the smallest scales, certainty gives way to probabilities like a coin forever spinning in the air. The multiverse asks, what if, instead of picking heads or tails, the universe just says yes to both? In one version of reality, you turn off this video right now and go to sleep early. In another, you stay up just a little longer, curious about where this is going. In yet another, you're not watching this at all. You're on a beach, or at work, or somewhere you can't even name. Each choice you make branches outward like a tree, and each branch holds a version of you shaped by slightly different winds. But let's step back for a moment. Why would scientists, of all people, often seen as the guardians of logic and clarity, entertain such a mind-bending idea? Well, sometimes science doesn't set out to be strange. It just follows the evidence, and the evidence leads to strange places. In quantum mechanics, one of the most widely accepted and yet deeply mysterious theories of physics, there is something called the measurement problem. Without diving too deep just yet, it goes something like this. Until a particle is observed, it exists in a cloud of probabilities. It hasn't chosen a state. It's not here or there, it's both and neither. It's something we call superposition. But when we measure it, when we look, the cloud collapses. The particle makes a choice, or so it seems. But the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests something else. What if, instead of collapsing into one outcome, reality simply splits. One universe where the particle lands here, and another where it lands there. One universe where the cat lives, and another where, quietly, it doesn't. One universe where you blink, and another where you don't. It's not the only interpretation, but it is one that doesn't require collapsing the wave of possibilities. It keeps everything, every outcome, every path. No moment wasted, no choice erased, just multiplied. Now, maybe that sounds dizzying, but it can also be strangely comforting. If every possibility unfolds somewhere, then maybe we're never really trapped by the choices we make. Maybe every version of us gets to try a different path, to follow a different dream. Maybe the lives we let go of still play out in some parallel rhythm, dancing just out of reach. Of course, we can't test this easily. We don't have a telescope that peers into other universes. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the math, the logic, and the quiet elegance of the idea, it calls to something deep in us. The same part of us that wonders who we might have been had we turned left instead of right. Had we said yes, or number, or nothing at all. So as you settle deeper into the quiet of your evening, let the idea unfold softly in your mind. Not as something to solve, but as something to sit with, like mist over a field, like a thought slipping away as you begin to fall asleep. Maybe you're not alone in this moment. Maybe, somewhere else, another version of you is listening to, just a heartbeat out of sync. Another you, still wondering, still reaching, still dreaming. And maybe that's the secret of the multiverse. Not that it's real in the way bricks and chairs are real, but that it gives us a way to imagine without limits. A way to see ourselves not as a single line, but as a constellation. Constellation of maybes. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast ocean, not the kind you see in postcards or travel shows, but something far larger, quieter, and stranger. There is no horizon, no sun to shimmer across the surface, no wind to push the waves, just a soft, endless expanse, rippling gently in all directions. Now imagine that scattered across this surface are bubbles, countless and constantly forming, some tiny, others immense, rising into being with barely a sound, then drifting, colliding, or slowly expanding until they vanish from sight. This ocean, in the imagination of some cosmologists, is space itself, and those bubbles, entire universes, each with its own version of reality. Perhaps one of them is ours. This is the idea of eternal inflation, a gentle but radical proposal about how the multiverse might be born. And like many big ideas in cosmology, it begins with something incredibly small. Right after the Big Bang, or what we perceive as the beginning of our universe, everything was unimaginably hot, dense, and compact. But rather than expanding at a steady pace, this early universe went through a phase of extraordinarily rapid growth, a kind of runaway stretching called cosmic inflation. In less than the blink of an eye, space itself expanded faster than the speed of light, smoothing out its wrinkles, stretching quantum fluctuations into the seeds of galaxies, and setting the stage for everything we know today. But here's the twist. In some versions of inflation theory, this runaway expansion never completely stops. It might slow down here and there, in pockets, giving birth to local universes like ours. But the larger process, the stretching, the bubbling, the foaming of space, continues eternally, elsewhere. That means while our universe cooled, settled, and began forming stars and atoms and cozy living rooms, other regions of this cosmic ocean kept expanding, kept forming new bubbles, each one potentially a brand new universe, disconnected from ours, sealed off by vast inflating distances. That's where the term eternal inflation comes from, And while it might sound poetic, it's actually the mathematical outcome of how inflation might behave under quantum conditions. According to this view, universes are not rare. They are inevitable. The formation of a universe is not a singular miracle, but a natural, ongoing feature of the greater cosmic landscape. Each of these bubble universes could be profoundly different from ours. Some may have more dimensions, or fewer. Some may have gravity that's stronger or weaker. Some might not support atoms at all. And in some, the laws of physics might be so alien, so utterly different, that even the word universe might feel like a poor translation. In our bubble, the sky looks blue. Light travels at a certain speed, and electrons dance in tidy orbits around atomic nuclei. But somewhere else, light might behave more like a liquid, or never form at all. It's hard to picture. We are, after all, creatures evolved to survive on a single planet orbiting a single sun. Our minds aren't built to handle infinities and eternities, and yet the more we learn about the cosmos, the more it seems that infinity is not just a number, it might be the backdrop to everything. To make this a bit more approachable, let's use a soft analogy. Imagine you're baking bread, and the dough is rising. As it expands, little pockets of air form inside, tiny bubbles trapped within the soft structure. Some are round, others misshapen. Some grow large, others stay small. If you could shrink down and step inside one of these bubbles, you'd experience your own enclosed world, unaware that just a few millimeters away, another pocket is growing with its own shape, its own character. Now stretch this idea across cosmic scales, and you have something resembling the eternal inflation model. You, in your pocket of reality, can't see the others, but they're there, separated not by walls, but by expanding space itself. And just as you can't move from one bubble of bread to another without breaking the structure, we can't easily visit other universes. In fact, many physicists believe it may be impossible. The inflating space between bubbles stretches so rapidly that it outruns any possible signal, any light, any ship, any probe. If you tried to go there, you wouldn't just be moving through space, you'd be chasing something that retreats faster than you could ever catch. Still, the idea lingers, gently, quietly, a background hum in the minds of those who study the deepest architecture of reality. If our universe is just one bubble in a cosmic foam, then everything we observe, the galaxies, the stars, the laws of physics, may be just a local condition. A regional dialect spoken by this corner of the multiverse. Elsewhere, the language is different. Some physicists even wonder whether this might explain some of the fine-tuned features of our world. The fact that gravity is just strong enough to hold galaxies together, but not so strong that everything collapses. That the charge of the electron is exactly what it needs to be for atoms to form. That the expansion rate of the universe is not too fast and not too slow, but just right for stars and planets to emerge. It's as if the universe is delicately balanced, as if it was made to be habitable. Or perhaps, say proponents of eternal inflation, it's not that this universe is special, it's that there are so many universes, such a vast and varied collection, that some of them were bound to get the recipe right. We are here, not because the universe is fine-tuned for us, but because in this one, life can ask questions, and so we ask. As you rest tonight, and your breath softens, and your thoughts begin to drift, let yourself imagine this cosmic sea, bubbling gently, endlessly, beyond the reach of light or sound. Picture the foam of newborn universes rising slowly in the dark, each one trying its hand at existence. Somewhere out there, perhaps, is a universe where you never stopped painting, one where dinosaurs still roam, one where time flows backwards, one where stars sing, not because it must be so, but because, in an infinite canvas, perhaps every colour finds a place to shine. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at a crossroads. Not a busy intersection or a map-marked trailhead, but something quieter, softer. A place where the road behind you gently dissolves into mist, and before you lie two winding paths, each leading into a future you can't quite see. You stand still, weighing one choice against another. Maybe you move left, maybe you don't. But now imagine that you did both, that you followed one road in one world and the other in a different one. You didn't decide between them. You simply split. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. Two versions of you, each walking a different future, unaware of each other, but equally real. This is the heart of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, one of the most fascinating and gently unsettling ideas in all of physics. It proposes that every time a quantum event can go more than one way, it does. And the universe doesn't choose a single outcome, it branches. At the smallest scales of existence, far smaller than a grain of sand or even the cells in your body, particles behave in ways that defy our everyday understanding. An electron, for instance, doesn't orbit a nucleus like a planet around the sun. Instead, it exists in a cloud of probabilities, a blur of potential positions, until something, an observation, a measurement, forces it to settle on one. This is what's known as superposition. A particle is not here or there. It's everywhere it might be, until it must pick a spot. But the many worlds interpretation, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in the 1950s, offers an elegant if wild alternative. The particle doesn't collapse into one state. Instead, reality itself divides. In one universe it lands here. In another, it lands there. And both outcomes unfold, not in competition, but in parallel. Extend this beyond particles, and you reach something far more personal. If your neurons, your thoughts, your choices are shaped by quantum events, then you too may branch. In one world you say yes, in another no. In one you keep walking, in another you turn around. And all of them are real, each path leading to a different future with a different you, shaped by that one quiet decision. Now this isn't something you'd notice. You wouldn't feel the split. You wouldn't see the other you waving from across the divide. The branching is seamless, invisible, woven into the fabric of the quantum world. From your perspective, only one outcome plays out, but behind the scenes, reality is not choosing, it's multiplying. To illustrate this in a gentler way, imagine a vast library. Each book on its shelves is a version of your life, a different draft, a different title. Some are short and strange, others long and beautifully complicated. You live inside one volume, turning its pages one at a time. But on those quiet, high shelves, the others remain, full of the chapters you didn't write, the lives you didn't live, not erased, not lost, just unread, yet still real in their own quiet way. The many worlds interpretation doesn't require magic. It doesn't break the laws of physics. In fact, it follows them, mathematically, logically, without the need for special observers or collapsing wave functions. It treats the universe as a grand quantum system, evolving smoothly and deterministically. But because we are observers within the system, we experience the world as if choices are made, as if one future unfolds while the others disappear. We only see one thread at a time. And yet, perhaps we sense the others, in dreams, in memories that don't feel quite right, in moments when we hesitate, feeling like we've already been here, already done this, already lost or gained something we never actually touched. Perhaps it's just imagination, or perhaps in some subtle, ineffable way, the other branches whisper across the divide. Some physicists dismiss this interpretation. It's elegant, yes, but untestable, at least for now. If these parallel universes exist, they don't interact with ours. They don't send messages or leave footprints. They're like ghost ships sailing forever on parallel seas, each with its own crew, its own course, its own story. We are passengers on just one of them, staring out into fog, wondering what lies beyond the rail, and yet the idea lingers, not because it gives us control, but because it offers possibility. In a world that often feels narrow and deterministic, the multiverse reminds us that the story could always unfold differently, that every what if isn't just a question, it might be a place. What would it mean to live like that were true? To walk through your day knowing that every moment branches, not as a burden, but as a kind of grace. That each version of you gets to try, that no choice is wasted, no path is truly closed. Maybe, in another universe, you never left your hometown, or you moved across the world. Maybe you became a teacher or a dancer, or someone who always wears yellow. Maybe your greatest fear in this life is your greatest joy in another. Maybe you're already living the version someone else only dreams of. It's not something we can prove, but it's something we can feel, not as a scientific conclusion, but as a poetic truth. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, think not just of the day you lived, but of the many versions that might have been. The roads not taken, the words not spoken, the lives you didn't live, but somewhere, maybe, you did. You're not just a single thread, you're a tapestry, and the universe, perhaps, is still weaving. Picture the universe as a vast stretched sheet, like an enormous fabric laid out under a sky you can't quite see. That fabric is space itself, and though it may look smooth and still from far away, if you lean in closer, you'll notice it bends. It sags gently around heavy things like stars and planets, and warps slightly in the presence of motion and energy. This bending, though invisible, is what we feel as gravity. Not a force pulling down, but a quiet invitation to follow a curved path through space. Now, imagine taking that sheet and folding it, not in a rough, crumpled way, but with care, as if you're tucking the edges together. 2 points, once far apart, are suddenly close, almost touching. And then, imagine drawing a tunnel from one point on the folded surface to the other, bypassing the stretch in between. That tunnel, if it could exist, is what physicists call a wormhole. Wormholes are not just the stuff of science fiction. They're genuine solutions to Einstein's equations of general relativity, mathematical possibilities tucked deep within the way space-time is shaped. The name wormhole itself comes from a simple image. Imagine a worm crawling across the surface of an apple. It could travel all the way around the outside, taking the long route, curving slowly across the skin, but it could also, if it chose, burrow straight through. Same destination, less distance, a shortcut through the inside. In physics, the idea is similar. A wormhole could connect two regions of space that are far apart, not by shrinking the distance, but by creating a new kind of passage, a tunnel outside the normal fabric, linking points in a way that bypasses the in-between. Of course, as elegant as that sounds, the reality, or rather the theory, is more delicate. Wormholes, if they exist, would likely require something strange to keep them open. Ordinary matter, the kind that makes up stars and tea kettles and sandwiches, wouldn't be enough. It would collapse the tunnel like a paper straw. What's needed instead is something exotic, matter with negative energy or negative mass, capable of resisting the tunnel's natural urge to pinch shut. We've never seen such matter directly, but the equations allow for it, and in physics, that's a door. Some theories suggest that microscopic wormholes could pop in and out of existence constantly at quantum scales, tiny threads blinking into reality and vanishing just as quickly. Others propose that a massive wormhole might exist near a black hole, or even inside one, though accessing such a thing, if it's even possible, remains purely theoretical. It's important to be clear here. No one has observed a wormhole. No telescope has found one glowing faintly between stars. They remain mathematical shadows, elegant, consistent but unseen. Still, the idea is compelling because it offers a possibility we rarely consider. That distance, as we know it, might be something we can bend. And it raises a quiet question. What else might we bend? In some solutions to Einstein's equations, wormholes don't just connect places. They might connect times. A traveller who enters one end might emerge not only somewhere else, but someone else. The future, the past, a when as much as a where. Now this is where things become tangled, not just scientifically but philosophically, because time, in relativity, is not separate from space. It's part of the same structure, a single woven fabric called space-time. And just as we can fold space, in theory, we can fold time. A wormhole could be a bridge not just through galaxies, but through eras. It's difficult to know how seriously to take such possibilities. They live on the edge of known physics, in a place where our understanding is still blurry and incomplete, but they are not fantasy. They are ideas born from the same equations that describe the orbits of planets, the bending of starlight, and the expansion of the universe itself. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about wormholes isn't their potential as cosmic doorways, but what they tell us about the universe. That space is not fixed, that the distance between here and there may not be absolute, that shortcuts could exist, hiding in the folds, not in violation of the laws of nature but as part of them. For now, they remain hypothetical. We have no technology to create one, no method to hold one open, and no guarantee that they are anything more than beautiful solutions on paper. But then again, many things in physics began that way. Black holes, once just mathematical curiosities, are now observed realities. Gravitational waves, once considered nearly impossible to detect, have been heard echoing from colliding stars. Maybe one day, a whisper in the dark will become a door. Until then, the idea lives in thought experiments and in quiet wonder, in movies and dreams and in the pages of speculative papers. We walk through our days assuming that here and there are separated by space, and that space is something we must cross. But what if that's not always true? What if, folded in the structure of the cosmos, there are bridges waiting to be found? Thin threads strung between the stars, humming softly with possibility. As you lie there, drifting deeper into the rhythm of breath and stillness, imagine that thread. Not loud or glowing, but silent and hidden. A space bridge gently sleeping between two corners of reality. Maybe it stretches from one galaxy to another. Maybe it links your bedroom to a point in deep space. Maybe it's just a metaphor, a thought, a path the mind can walk, even if the body cannot. Tonight, you don't have to travel. You can simply rest, knowing that somewhere in the equations of the universe shortcuts are allowed, and that's enough. Time, for most of us, feels like a river. It moves in one direction, quiet, steady, unstoppable. From sunrise to sunset, from breath to breath, it carries us forward, never back. You wake, you act, you remember. The past holds your stories, the present holds your choices, and the future, like a foggy road, holds your questions. But what if that river wasn't quite what it seemed? What if time could curve, twist, or even loop? And what if, under certain strange conditions, it might be possible, not in fantasy but in physics, to step off the riverbank and walk upstream? This idea, at once breathtaking and bewildering, lives quietly inside Einstein's general theory of relativity. His equations, which describe how gravity works by warping space-time, allow for some peculiar solutions, mathematical worlds, where the fabric of reality is not just curved around stars and planets, but folded in on itself. In some of these solutions, if the conditions are just right, it becomes possible to follow a path through space and time that loops back to its own beginning. These paths are called closed time-like curves, and they suggest that, at least in theory, the universe might allow time travel. Now, to be clear, this is not the time travel of popular films, where you can dial in a year and leap into the past like stepping off an elevator. It's subtler than that, more abstract and difficult to grasp. A closed time-like curve is a kind of loop in space-time, a path that winds forward locally but ends up back where it started globally. If you were riding such a curve, you'd never feel like you were going backward. You'd simply continue forward and eventually arrive at a moment you had already lived. It's a strange concept, made stranger by what it implies. Because if time travel into the past is possible, even in theory, then so are paradoxes. Take the famous grandfather paradox. Suppose you travel back in time and accidentally, or deliberately, prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. Without that meeting, you're never born. But if you're never born, then you can't travel back in time to interfere. And if you don't interfere, then your grandparents do meet, and you are born. But then you go back, and the loop continues. It's a knot in causality, a logical tangle that seems to defy reason. To resolve these paradoxes, physicists and philosophers have proposed many ideas. One of the gentlest is the notion of self-consistency, that even if time loops exist, events within them must be self-consistent. You can go back, but you cannot change the past in a way that prevents your own journey. Whatever you do was always part of the timeline. It's not a free rewrite, it's a closed script. There's also the possibility that any paradox created by time travel might cause the timeline to split. This brings us back to the multiverse idea. Perhaps every change you make creates a new branch, a new version of events, where both outcomes coexist in parallel. One where you prevented the past, and another where you didn't. Neither cancels the other. Both unfold. But stepping back from the paradoxes and the math, there's something more delicate to consider. Something human. Because even if we can't build a time machine, our minds are already time travelers. We revisit the past in memory, relive moments in dreams, and leap into imagined futures with every plan we make. The mind doesn't obey the clock. It slips, it spirals, it returns to the places we thought we'd left behind. You're lying in bed, and suddenly you're 10 years old again, holding a sun-warmed stone in your hand, or you're picturing next Tuesday, already feeling the conversation you haven't had yet. The body is still, but the self is moving. Sometimes, late at night, memory and imagination blur. Was that a dream? A memory? A feeling borrowed from another life? We say things like, "It feels like déjà vu," or "I've been here before," even when we haven't. Perhaps it's just a brain quirk, a misfire in the circuits of recognition. Or perhaps it's something deeper, a resonance across time, a loop softly felt. Time, in the universe we know, is intricately tied to space. The faster you move through space, the slower time flows for you. We've measured this with satellites and atomic clocks, watched it play out in the faint slowing of time for astronauts orbiting Earth. The effect is tiny at our scale, but real. And it means that time is not fixed. It bends, it stretches, it responds. So when we ask whether we can travel through time, perhaps the better question is, how flexible is time really? Can it fold back on itself like space does? And if so, what would that mean for us? Perhaps there are regions of the universe where space-time is twisted just right, around massive rotating objects, or within strange geometries of energy, where time loops become more than math. Perhaps someday we'll find those places, or build them, or fall into them by accident, the way light vanishes into a black hole, unaware of the edge until it's already crossed. But for now, we live in the forward flow, day into night, cause into effect, breath into breath. Still, it's comforting to know that the equations, those quiet, elegant rules beneath reality, leave room for the extraordinary. They don't demand time travel, but they don't forbid it either, and that's enough to wonder. So tonight, as you drift between one moment and the next, between the quiet of now and the dreams of what comes after, imagine time not as a line, but as a loop. Imagine that every memory is a touch point, every dream a tether. That the past isn't gone, it's just out of reach, waiting on the far side of a curve. And maybe, just maybe, time isn't a river at all. Maybe it's a circle, drawn so wide we mistake it for a straight path. Somewhere in the dark beyond our skies, scattered across the vast canvas of the cosmos, there are places where light has given up. Not because it was extinguished, but because it was trapped, held in by gravity so intense, so quietly absolute, that even photons, the swiftest messengers in the universe, cannot escape. These places are black holes, and though they are among the most mysterious and extreme objects we know, they are also among the most elegant. In their silence, they speak to the deep structure of space and time. In their stillness, they reshape everything around them. To most of us, the term black hole evokes an image of emptiness, a void, a tear, a place where things vanish. But a black hole is not a hole in the usual sense. It's not a tunnel or a drain or a doorway, at least not in the way our senses understand. It's a region of space where gravity has won, a place where the mass of a collapsing star, or the merging of many stars, has been compressed into such a dense point that the surrounding fabric of space-time folds inward completely. Not with violence, but with inevitability. At the boundary of a black hole lies the event horizon, a name that sounds almost poetic. It is the line past which no information, no light, no signal can ever return. To an outside observer, anything that crosses this boundary fades slowly from view, stretched and reddened by gravity's relentless pull until it becomes invisible. But from the perspective of something falling in, the experience is stranger still. There is no bump, no jolt, no sign that the line has been crossed. Just a quiet fall toward a place where the known laws of physics dissolve. At the heart of every black hole, or at least in the centre of the classical model, there is something called a singularity, a point of infinite density and zero volume where gravity becomes infinite, and the equations that describe space and time simply break down. It's not that the laws stop working, it's that they stop being able to describe what's there. It's a mystery wrapped inside mathematics, a question mark in the shape of a point. But here's where things become more curious. Some physicists have wondered, if a black hole is a region where everything falls in and nothing gets out, might there be an inverse, a region where nothing can enter and everything is pushed outward? This hypothetical counterpart is known as a white hole. If black holes are entrances, deep gravitational wells pulling inward, then white holes are the opposite, outflows, erupting matter and light outward with no way back in. There is no direct evidence that white holes exist. They are so far theoretical constructions, perfectly valid in Einstein's equations but unobserved in reality. Yet some models suggest that black holes and white holes could be connected, like opposite ends of a tunnel, a wormhole, perhaps, or a bridge between universes. One theory suggests that what falls into a black hole in one universe might be expelled from a white hole in another, as if the cosmos were a grand recycling engine, passing information through folds in its own fabric. This is deeply speculative, and no one can say for sure if it reflects reality. But the fact that the math allows for such symmetry is compelling. The universe, in many of its patterns, prefers balance, waves and troughs, charges and opposites, forces and counterforces. Maybe black holes are not just the end of things, but also beginnings, strange beginnings, hidden behind veils we cannot yet lift. Even without invoking other universes, black holes are profound. They are not exotic footnotes to the cosmos. They are part of its scaffolding. At the centre of nearly every galaxy, including our own Milky Way, there lies a supermassive black hole, millions or even billions of times the mass of our Sun. They influence the orbits of stars, shape galactic structures, and perhaps even play a role in how galaxies form and evolve. In their darkness, they have power. In their silence, they have reach. What makes black holes especially beautiful, in a quiet, almost haunting way, is that they preserve a kind of memory. According to physicist Stephen Hawking, black holes may not destroy information after all. Through a process called Hawking radiation, they slowly evaporate, emitting faint particles over trillions of years. It's been suggested that hidden within this radiation, encoded in ways we don't yet fully understand, is a trace of everything that ever fell in, as if the universe, even at its most secretive, refuses to forget. So what hides in a black hole? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. Perhaps the answer is not a location, but a principle, that at the edge of understanding there is always mystery, that some doors are not meant to be opened but to be contemplated, that some silence isn't emptiness but potential. As you lie there tonight, imagine drifting toward one of these cosmic thresholds, not falling with fear, but floating with curiosity. The stars thin out, the sky darkens, the gravity pulls, not like a claw, but like a lullaby. And then you reach the horizon, not a wall, but a whisper. You cross it gently, and beyond? No one knows. But maybe, just maybe, on the other side there's light again. It begins like a whisper, a moment you've lived before, or at least it feels that way. You're sipping tea in a cafe, or stepping through a doorway, or reaching for a book you don't remember ever reading, and suddenly you pause. A strange stillness wraps itself around the moment. A thought stirs. I've been here, but you haven't. You couldn't have. Still, it lingers. Familiarity without a source. Certainty without a timeline. This is déjà vu, a French phrase that simply means already seen, and yet it carries with it so much more than just visual repetition. It's a sensation, fleeting and uncanny, that a moment you are currently experiencing has somehow already occurred, and even though it lasts just a few seconds, it often leaves behind a ripple. Not fear, exactly, but a soft curiosity, a question that floats just beyond the edge of logic. From the perspective of neuroscience, déjà vu is most often explained as a kind of memory hiccup, an error in the brain's recognition system. Our minds are constantly encoding information, creating mental fingerprints of everything we see, hear, and touch. Usually these patterns are sorted efficiently. New experiences are stored as fresh, and familiar ones are tagged accordingly. But occasionally the sorting process stumbles. A current experience is mistakenly routed through memory circuits, making it feel like something we've already stored. It's as if your brain quietly nudges you and says, "You've done this before," when you haven't. Not here, not now. Some researchers believe it's a kind of miscommunication between short-term and long-term memory systems. Others suggest it may be the result of slight delays between the hemispheres of the brain, causing a duplicated perception. Still others have explored links between déjà vu and certain kinds of temporal lobe activity, especially in people with epilepsy, where similar sensations are sometimes reported just before a seizure. All of these explanations have merit. They're grounded in biology, in patterns of neurons and electrical impulses, but none of them quite capture the experience itself. The strange clarity, the weight of the moment, the eerie stillness that often comes with it. It's more than a technical misfire. It's an emotional echo. And that's where speculation begins to tiptoe in. Some have wondered if déjà vu might be more than a brain glitch, if it might be a kind of bleed-through, a gentle overlap between timelines. Perhaps in a universe where many versions of you exist, occasionally those versions resonate. A moment that one you has already lived finds its way somehow into your present. not as a full memory, but as a trace, a ripple, a familiar shape in unfamiliar water. Of course, this is not something we can test. There is no instrument that can detect a leak in the fabric between realities. No machine that can confirm whether timelines have brushed against each other like silk sleeves in a crowded room. But that doesn't make the idea any less evocative. There's something comforting in the thought that we are not entirely bound to a single path, that our lives may contain gentle shadows of the choices we didn't make. Imagine for a moment that each time you experience déjà vu, it's not an error but a harmony. Two versions of you, moving almost in sync, passing through similar spaces, thinking similar thoughts, their footsteps overlapping for a single instant. A kind of resonance across the multiverse, not long enough to see each other, just long enough to feel that quiet click, that sense of having arrived somewhere familiar, even though all signs say it's new. Some people experience déjà vu only once or twice in their lives. Others feel it often, sometimes triggered by smells, sounds, or faces. And there are rare individuals who experience it persistently, sometimes tied to neurological conditions, sometimes not. For them, life becomes a series of mirrored moments, echoes upon echoes. They are like travellers caught between layers of memory, uncertain which version of events they're living. Science, cautious and methodical, tends to avoid multiverse explanations. It seeks answers that can be measured, repeated, confirmed. But human experience is not always so tidy, and so, in the quiet space where measurement falters, imagination steps in. You might also consider dreams. How often do we find ourselves dreaming of places we've never been, faces we don't know, yet wake with the distinct feeling that something was remembered, not invented? Could dreams and déjà vu be connected? A kind of subconscious mapping of paths not taken, lives not lived. Some philosophers have even suggested that déjà vu might be tied to reincarnation or to inherited memory. Others, more metaphorically, view it as a kind of spiritual nudge, a reminder that life is larger than it appears, that we are part of something more layered, more interconnected than we can fully grasp. Perhaps the truth is simpler, or perhaps it's more complex than we will ever know. What matters for now is how déjà vu makes us feel. It interrupts the normal flow of time. It asks us to stop, to notice, to wonder. It reminds us that even in the most ordinary moments, there is room for mystery. So tonight, if you find yourself lying in the dark and recalling a moment that feels like it's happened before, let the sensation wash over you. Don't chase it. Don't try to explain it away. Just let it be what it is. A flicker across the surface of your story, a gentle crossing of timelines, a quiet echo from a life just out of reach. And if, tomorrow, you walk into a room and feel that strange pulse of familiarity rise again, smile softly. You've been here, and also, you haven't. Let's play a quiet memory game. Close your eyes, unless they already are, and picture a children's book you may have seen growing up. It's about a family of cartoon bears, kind-hearted and clumsy. The name, almost certainly, you remember as the Berenstain Bears. But what if you opened a book today and saw the name spelled differently? Berenstain, with an A? You'd probably blink, then smile, then frown. You'd be sure it used to be Ain, not Ain. And yet, the printed text insists otherwise. Not a typo, not a reprint, just the way it's always been. This is the Mandela effect, named after another misremembered moment. A large number of people, especially online, have reported remembering that Nelson Mandela died in prison during the 1980s. They recall vivid details, news footage, mourning crowds, a global reaction. But none of it happened. Mandela was released, became South Africa's president, and lived until 2013. These people aren't lying or exaggerating, they're simply certain. They remember a world that doesn't seem to match the one we live in. And it's not just these two examples. there's a growing catalogue of so-called Mandela effects. The Monopoly man never wore a monocle. Luke, I am your father was never said in Star Wars. The Fruit of the Loom logo never had a cornucopia. Curious George never had a tail. These details feel so deeply embedded in memory, and yet they don't align with the official versions. Something feels off. So what's going on? The most grounded explanation lies in the nature of memory itself. Human memory is not a perfect recording. It's a reconstruction, a weaving together of bits and impressions into something that feels coherent. Our minds often fill in gaps, smooth over inconsistencies, and align experiences with expectations. When many people share similar environments, media, or cultural cues, they can collectively form similar errors, shared misrememberings that feel like truth. Psychologists call this confabulation, the creation of false memories without intent to deceive. Combine that with confirmation bias, where we tend to seek information that supports what we already believe, and you have a recipe for group-level certainty built on shaky foundations. And yet, even knowing all this, the sensation remains. The wrong logo looks right. The remembered phrase still echoes. For most scientists, the Mandela effect is a fascinating case study in how culture shapes perception and how fragile our memory systems really are. But for others, particularly those who like to think just beyond the boundaries of what we can measure, it's something more. A possible hint, however faint, that we're not always rooted in a single timeline. What if, they wonder, the Mandela effect isn't about faulty memory at all? What if these moments are traces, residue, from shifts between realities? A kind of glitch in the multiverse. Maybe in a parallel universe, the Bear family was spelled Berenstein. Maybe Mandela did die in prison. Maybe your mind remembers that version because, in some way not fully understood, you were once aligned with that branch of the timeline. And now, somehow you've moved. Of course, there's no scientific evidence for this, no proof of timeline jumping, no instruments have detected reality shifting. But what this interpretation offers is something deeply human, a sense of hidden order, of meaning behind the oddness, a story that makes emotional sense, even if it's unprovable, and perhaps that's part of its power. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, the idea that these glitches are signals rather than errors offers comfort. It gives people a way to connect, to share their experiences and say, "You remember it that way too?" It's a kind of community, a modern folklore made from fractured memory and whispered possibility. We might think of it as a collective dream, not literal, not measurable, but shared nonetheless. A memory of something that never happened, held by many, a consensus of ghosts. It's easy to dismiss this as internet oddity. But consider for a moment how often we rely on memory to construct identity. Who you believe you are is built on a long chain of remembered choices, names, places, and faces. If even small pieces of that chain become uncertain, it can create a ripple of doubt, not just about the past, but about the nature of reality itself. And yet, perhaps that ripple is also a gift. It reminds us that our understanding of the world is never as solid as it seems, that perception is fluid, that time, truth, and memory are all things we build, not just things we inherit. Maybe the Mandela effect is not a signal from another dimension, but a kind of poetic feedback from within. Our minds reminding us that the world we experience is deeply shaped by the stories we tell ourselves. Still, the question lingers, soft and unresolved. Could there be other versions of this reality, brushing up against ours? Could some trace of them slip through, not as portals, not as proof, but as feelings? Tonight, if you feel a moment of strangeness, if something looks wrong but feels right, don't rush to explain it. Let it sit. Let it whisper. Maybe it's just a trick of memory, or maybe, just maybe, it's the quiet friction of two realities passing each other in the dark. You glance at the clock. It's 2:14 p.m. You stretch, stand up, take a short walk to clear your head. Perhaps you step outside, feel the warmth of the sun, or let the breeze lift your thoughts for a few quiet minutes. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. And yet, when you return, barely a moment later it seems, you look again. It's 3:09. Almost an hour has slipped by, unaccounted for. There's no memory of what happened, no sense of time lost, just a blank spot in the middle of an otherwise ordinary day. It's easy to dismiss such moments. Maybe you got distracted. Maybe your phone kept you longer than you realized. Maybe you sat down to think and drifted off without noticing. But what if, once in a while, those missing minutes aren't just forgetfulness? What if they are folds in time itself? Soft, almost imperceptible shifts, like falling into the space between two pages. Across cultures and stories, there have long been tales of people who step outside time, whether for moments or years. A traveller who enters a misty wood and emerges, unchanged, to find that decades have passed. A child who wanders behind a waterfall and returns hours later, while their family has searched for them in vain. A man driving along a quiet road who glances away for just a second and then finds himself miles from where he was, with no memory of how he got there. In modern times, these stories have changed shape but not nature. We now hear of people who zone out completely while driving, only to arrive at their destination with no memory of the journey. Others describe waking from a nap convinced only minutes have passed, only to discover they've slept through most of the day. Some speak of entire blocks of memory that vanish after a seemingly mundane errand. These are often brushed aside as time slips or dissociation, a psychological phenomenon, not a paranormal one. And in many cases that's absolutely true. The brain is capable of remarkable and sometimes puzzling things. Under stress or distraction, it can shift into modes that prioritize safety or simplicity, temporarily reducing awareness of the passage of time. This is common during periods of intense focus or during moments of emotional overwhelm. It's also seen in states of dissociation, when the mind pulls away from the present to protect itself from stress or sensory overload. In these cases, the time lost is not truly lost, it was simply unrecorded. There's also the phenomenon of microsleeps, brief episodes of sleep that last only seconds, occurring when someone is extremely tired, even without them realizing. A person might be standing, walking, or even driving, but during these brief lapses, the brain switches off just long enough to miss what happens. It's a reminder that even something as reliable as wakefulness is more fragile than we think. Still, there are accounts that don't quite fit these molds, experiences that, even after explanation, leave behind a quiet sense of wonder. The traveller who felt an unexplained pull before losing time. The person who suddenly found themselves in a place they couldn't have reached on foot. The dreams that bleed into waking life, carrying names, languages, or memories that don't quite belong. Some of these stories may be embellished, others may be the product of confusion or flawed recall. But what they have in common is that they echo something deep in us. The feeling that time is not always steady, not always knowable. That, like a path in a forest, it can twist without warning and sometimes disappear beneath your feet. And when we pair that feeling with ideas like the multiverse or higher dimensions, we find ourselves asking unusual questions. Could these moments be signs, not just of mental drift, but of movement between layers of reality? Could there be thin places, barely perceptible, where two timelines touch and something crosses over? Not a portal in the dramatic sense, but a soft nudge, a blink, a breath between worlds. In folklore, there are names for these places. The Celts called them thin spaces, locations where the veil between the world of the living and the other world was worn down, fragile. In some Andean traditions, certain stone doorways are believed to be entrances to the spirit realm, accessible only at the right time and with the right intention. In Japan, There are legends of people vanishing into forests and reappearing unchanged, unable to explain the years that have passed. These stories may not be science, but they are something just as old, an intuition that time, space, and experience are not always as separate as they appear. Even within physics, time is not as rigid as we once believed. We know that it dilates, stretches, and even stops under extreme gravity. We know that it's tied intimately to the motion of light and the curve of space. So if time can already act so strangely under conditions we understand, why not allow room for phenomena we don't fully grasp? Perhaps the feeling of lost time is just what it seems. A lapse in attention, a slip of memory, a natural response to exhaustion. But perhaps, every so often, it's something else. A moment when the normal rhythm of now stumbles and another rhythm, one we don't recognise, briefly takes its place. So if one day you find yourself staring at the clock and wondering where the hour went, don't be alarmed. Let the mystery be gentle. Let it rest beside you, like fog curling in a quiet valley. Whether it was a dream, a distraction, or a dance across dimensions, it passed, and you are still here. Maybe that's what matters most. There are places in the world that seem to hum quietly beneath the surface, places where the air feels heavier, the light seems slower, and time itself stretches just a little thinner. You might not notice at first. It's not a loud or obvious thing. But when you stand still, when you listen carefully, there's a feeling, as though something unseen is watching from just beyond the veil. Not with menace, but with quiet attention. These are the places some call thin spaces, and while the term may be poetic, the sensation it describes is very real to those who felt it. Let's begin with one of the most famous of these whispered corners, the Bermuda Triangle. A loosely defined region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean, it has long been associated with stories of strange disappearances, ships vanishing without a trace, planes deviating from course, then falling silent, instruments behaving erratically, compasses spinning, radios failing. The official explanations vary: unexpected storms, magnetic anomalies, human error, but the mythology persists. Something about the triangle invites the imagination to wander. What if, some ask, these aren't accidents at all? What if there's a door there, just slightly ajar? Of course, science offers grounded alternatives. The region is a heavily trafficked area, subject to sudden changes in weather, strong currents, and complex navigation routes. Natural explanations cover most of the phenomena, but despite that, the idea that the Bermuda Triangle is more than geography continues to float, just like the ocean it's named for, mysterious, deep, and ever-shifting. Then there's Stonehenge standing silently on the plains of Wiltshire. These massive stones, arranged in careful circles, have watched over the land for thousands of years. Archaeologists have uncovered theories about its use: a calendar, a temple, an observatory. And yet none of these explanations fully answer the deeper question: why here? Why in this place, with these stones, aligned so precisely with the solstices? Some visitors to Stonehenge report a stillness there that goes beyond the quiet of the countryside. A subtle vibration in the ground, a pressure in the air. It may be suggestion, or the weight of history pressing gently against the moment. Or perhaps, just perhaps, there's something in that place, something woven into the stone, into the alignment of sky and earth, that makes the boundary between worlds a little more porous. Across the globe, other locations carry similar reputations. The Gate of the Sun at Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the Aramu Muru stone doorway near Lake Titicaca, the Sedona vortices in Arizona, Mount Shasta in California, Uluru in Australia. These are places said to resonate with energy, to pulse with a frequency not felt elsewhere. Some say they are sacred sites, points of convergence for spiritual energy, or even cosmic ley lines. Others describe them as potential portals, not necessarily in the science fiction sense of metal doors with flashing lights, but as symbolic thresholds, places where the ordinary steps aside and something else peeks through. Many of these places are tied to ancient traditions. They're not inventions of modern mystery hunters, but sacred sites passed down through generations, embedded in myth, in song, in story. They speak of spirits that walk unseen, of ancestors who still watch, of gods who entered through light and left without a sound. Whether taken literally or metaphorically, these tales serve as reminders that not all knowledge comes with equations. Some comes in symbols. The idea of a portal, in its deepest sense, is not always a door to another place. It can also be a shift in awareness, a liminal moment, a pause between what was and what comes next. You may have felt it without realizing, in a forest just after rain, on a mountaintop at dawn, in a silent cathedral, in the pause before a final goodbye. These moments, though fleeting, feel different. Time stretches, the world narrows, you're more present, yet less solid. It's as though reality breathes in, and for just a second holds its breath. Could it be that these sacred places are simply the physical counterparts to such moments? Spaces designed to create pause, to invite reverence, to loosen our grip on ordinary perception, and let the extraordinary slip in. Many ancient structures were aligned with the stars. Temples faced equinoxes. Chambers were built to catch slivers of sunlight only once a year. These alignments suggest a relationship between place, time, and meaning. A cosmic choreography encoded in stone. It wasn't just about construction. It was about connection. Modern physics often separates itself from these ideas. Sacred geometry is not something you'll find in a peer-reviewed journal. But even physicists are beginning to speak more softly about the nature of space and consciousness. The more we learn about quantum entanglement, about the strange behavior of particles across space and time, the more we begin to wonder, does the observer matter more than we thought? Is reality fixed, or is it, in part, responsive? Perhaps these thin places, these temples and triangles and whispered doorways, are not literal cracks in the cosmos, but mirrors, designed to reflect something back at us, to make us aware of how layered our perception truly is, how memory, imagination, and experience blur into something else, something not easily named, but deeply felt. So the next time you find yourself in a place that feels off, don't rush to name it paranormal. Don't worry about proof. Just stand still for a moment. Listen. Let the space speak. Maybe it's ancient memory. Maybe it's geometry. Maybe it's just you. Open, attentive, soft enough to feel the echo of something greater. And if that place whispers back, let it. If our universe is but one thread in a vast entangled tapestry, then each neighbouring thread may carry its own rules, its own way of unfolding. Gravity may pull stronger or weaker. Light may travel slower or not at all. Atoms might bind in unfamiliar ways. Time might flow sideways. And if life exists there, under those altered rules, then it too must take forms we can hardly imagine. We tend to picture alien life as variations on a theme, taller, shorter, scaled or furred, maybe with extra limbs or unfamiliar colours. But beneath these guesses lies an assumption that life elsewhere is built from similar parts, shaped by similar pressures, that it breathes, grows, reproduces, moves, that it obeys biology as we know it. But what if the constants that guide our chemistry, the charge of the electron, the strength of the weak nuclear force, the ratio of mass between proton and neutron, were just slightly different? In our universe, these values are exquisitely tuned for the formation of stable atoms, molecules, stars, and planets. Tweak them slightly, and carbon might never form, water might never exist, stars might never ignite. But in other universes, those where the tuning still allows for complexity, perhaps life emerges not despite those changes, but because of them. Imagine a world where electromagnetic forces are much stronger, so that atoms cling tightly, but time flows sluggishly. Life there might be slow, glacial, unfolding over millennia, its thoughts stretching like vines across eons. Or imagine a universe where gravity is so weak that planets form as gentle clouds, and life drifts freely in vast, luminous orbs, beings made not of cells but of magnetized plasma, humming and pulsing across light years like intelligent auroras. On Earth, we already know that life can be remarkably strange. Deep in the ocean, where sunlight never reaches, there are creatures that glow with their own light, survive on chemical heat from the planet's crust, and thrive in pressures that would crush most living cells. On the surfaces of Antarctic lakes, trapped beneath ice for thousands of years, microbes stir with ancient metabolism, and in the cracks of radioactive rocks, certain bacteria feed on the decay of uranium, utterly indifferent to what we call habitable. Then there are tardigrades, tiny bear-shaped animals that can survive in the vacuum of space, boil in hot springs, freeze in polar ice, and return to life after decades of stillness. They are reminders that life, once born, is stubborn. It adapts, evolves, stretches into every corner it can reach. So if that's true here, on our small watery planet, what might it mean for universes where the building blocks are entirely different? Where matter is crystalline, not carbon-based? Where life doesn't move through space but through charge? Where intelligence is not housed in brains, but in shifting fields of energy, diffuse, radiant, non-local? We might picture beings that are not born but condensed, that do not age but vibrate through states, that do not see as we see or speak as we speak, but communicate through pressure waves in quantum foam or shimmer pulses in folded space-time. It sounds like science fiction, and perhaps it is. But it's also gentle speculation, grounded in one key truth. The laws of nature define what life can be. Change the laws, and life must change with them. Some scientists and philosophers have wondered whether consciousness itself could emerge in forms far removed from the biological. Could an entire ocean, circulating with layered temperature gradients and chemical flows, host thought? Could a planet-wide crystal network conduct awareness? Could stars themselves, burning for billions of years, form structures complex enough to sense, to wonder, to feel? In some visions of the multiverse, entire realities exist where time is not linear, where cause does not precede effect, where beings experience all their moments at once, like pages in a book they can read simultaneously. What would it mean to meet such a creature? Not something you could point to and say, it's over there, but a presence that sees your whole life as a single story, beginning, middle, and end all at once. What would communication even mean then? Would it speak, or would it simply wait for you to understand? When we imagine these things, not to frighten ourselves, but to stretch our thinking, we expand the meaning of life itself. It becomes not a list of biological traits, but a pattern of emergence, a process, a blossoming of complexity into something aware. And maybe, just maybe, some of those beings have wondered about us too. Not because we are special, but because across the fabric of existence, there may be a shared curiosity, a gentle reaching outward. Perhaps across these countless universes, whenever complexity becomes awareness, it leans, ever so slightly, toward the unknown, toward the possibility of another. So tonight, as you rest beneath your ceiling or the sky, think of the life that may drift in the spaces between stars, not in ships, but in shapes beyond our understanding. Life that doesn't look like us, or move like us, or think in our rhythms, but that exists nonetheless, soft, quiet, watching. Not gods, not monsters, just others. In a multiverse, the question isn't whether we're alone, it's which we, is asking. Imagine for a moment a world that is flat, not metaphorically but truly geometrically flat. 2 dimensions only, no height, no above or below, just forward and back, left and right. Now imagine a being who lives there, a flatlander. To them, everything is lines and edges. There are no spheres, only circles seen as slivers. There are no cubes, only strange distortions of shapes as they pass. And now imagine that you, a 3-dimensional being, reach your hand into that world. The flatlander would not see your fingers, your palm, your form. They would see only a strange series of slices appearing one after the other. First a dot, then a widening shape, then a shrinking curve. An inexplicable event moving through their space. And to them, your presence would be mysterious, impossible, divine perhaps, or terrifying. This idea comes from a story written over a century ago, a novel called Flatland, and it still serves today as one of the gentlest ways to begin understanding dimensions beyond our own. Because if we can imagine what it would be like for a 2-dimensional being to experience a 3-dimensional reality, we can begin to stretch our minds just slightly toward the idea of a 4th spatial dimension, or a 5th, or more, and how strange, how beautiful, how utterly incomprehensible it might be to encounter a being that moves freely through those hidden directions. In our daily lives, we move through 3 spatial dimensions, length, width, and height, and we're bound by a 4th, time. Time flows forward, always. It carries us like a current, and we are powerless to step outside it. But if there are beings who exist in higher spatial dimensions, time may not bind them in the same way. To them, our lifetimes may appear as whole structures, stretched out from birth to death like a sculpture, like a spiral frozen in glass. They would not need to watch us grow. They would see us already grown, not as a snapshot, but as an entire unfolding, as though your life were a story they could hold in their hands, turn over, examine and understand in one glance. What kind of consciousness could comprehend such a view? Perhaps such a being would not think in words or feel emotion in the way we do. Their awareness might not be located in one time or one body, but distributed, spread across many spaces, many moments, many selves. They might communicate not with sound, but with shape, with harmonics in geometry, with folding and unfolding patterns across dimensions we can't perceive, and perhaps they are not far, perhaps they are near us even now, but like the Flatlander, we cannot see them, cannot recognize the signs. What to us is coincidence, inspiration, intuition, might, in rare instances, be the faint shadow of a higher presence brushing against our limited view. In string theory, there's a concept that our universe may include up to 11 dimensions, most of them curled tightly in on themselves, far too small for us to perceive directly. We live on what some physicists call a brane, a 3-dimensional slice in a higher dimensional space. If this is true, then we're already existing in a realm that is more than we can see, and the beings who inhabit those larger structures might be as real as we are, simply beyond our perceptual reach. It's humbling, isn't it? To realize that our senses, our tools, our language, even our mathematics, may be only scratching the surface of what is. That somewhere, in the quiet folds of reality, there may be intelligences so vast and so gentle that they move among us without ever being noticed. Not because they hide, but because we do not yet know how to look, and yet even as we fail to see them, we imagine them. We draw them in art, we describe them in story. We dream of angels and watchers, of whispering entities who guide us unseen. Perhaps these are metaphors, or perhaps they are echoes, soft impressions left behind by something larger than understanding. There is something profoundly peaceful in this idea, that there may be minds out there that are not competitors or conquerors, but caretakers, not human-like at all, but not unfriendly, simply different, with no need to communicate as we do, because communication for them is embedded in the structure of being itself. And if one of them were to notice you, not your face or voice or body, but your full arc, your trajectory through time, what would they see? Would they see sorrow and struggle? Would they see beauty and longing? Would they see you as a brief spark in a dark sky, or as a thread woven deep into something much larger? Perhaps they would see your entire life as a song, not one note, but many, not a moment, but a melody. And perhaps in their own way they would hum along. So tonight, as you lie still and the world dims, allow your mind to stretch. Imagine that beyond the veil of what is visible and measurable, there are other dimensions, hidden like folded wings, and within those folds there may be life, minds, listeners, not distant in space but layered over us like light and shadow, not strangers but silent companions, walking beside us in ways we'll never quite understand. And maybe in the quiet between thoughts you'll feel them, a soft touch, a presence without shape, the sense that you are seen, not just as you are now, but as you've always been, and as you are yet to. Maybe think back to a moment in your life when you stood at a crossroads. Maybe it was a decision so small you barely noticed it at the time, turning left instead of right, saying yes instead of no, answering a phone call, not answering. We carry these moments with us, usually without realizing just how many tiny branches grow from them. But if the multiverse exists, if every possible outcome plays out somewhere, then somewhere out there is another version of you who chose differently. Someone who stepped onto a slightly different path and walked a life that looks both familiar and strange. In some realities, that other you might be almost indistinguishable, just a different haircut, a different favourite song. In others, the differences might be profound. A career you never pursued, a love you never found or never lost, a city you never moved to, a risk you never took. And because the possibilities are infinite, the variations are endless. There could be versions of you who are musicians, teachers, explorers, quiet poets living by the sea. Others who never left their hometown, who made peace with things you're still wrestling with. Some who never made it past a difficult day. Some who soared beyond what you ever dreamed. It's a strange thought, comforting and a little bittersweet, to imagine that every version of you is out there, living a life that is just as real, just as full of feeling and memory and wonder as your own. You're not a single point. You're a constellation. Some physicists suggest that if the multiverse is real, and if each quantum event can split the timeline, then you're constantly branching. Each moment of choice or chance spins out new realities, not just for you, but for everyone. In one, you spilled your coffee and missed the train. In another, you caught it. In one, you decided to speak your mind. In another, you stayed quiet. All of them diverge, all of them continue, and yet, despite this infinite branching, your experience remains grounded here, on this path, in this body, within this string of moments you call your life. So what would it mean to meet another version of yourself? Not metaphorically, but really. If somehow, through some fold in space-time or flicker in reality, you encountered another you, would you recognize yourself? Would it be like looking in a mirror, or would it be more like meeting a stranger who somehow knows all your secrets? Would there be instant empathy or deep discomfort? Would you ask about their choices? Would they ask about yours? Philosophers have long pondered the nature of identity. If you lived a different life, made different choices, would you still be you? Is your essence something fixed, or is it shaped, moment by moment, by the life you've lived? In this way, alternate versions of you aren't just curiosities, they're reflections, mirrors that let you explore the boundaries of who you are. And maybe that's the deeper invitation of the multiverse, not to escape this life for another, but to understand that within you are many possibilities. that you contain echoes of those other lives, those other selves, that the feelings you can't explain, the sudden longing for a place you've never been, the strange familiarity of a stranger's face, might be quiet reminders that you're more layered, more complex, more beautifully unfinished than you imagined. Sometimes, when we're hard on ourselves, when regret clings like fog, we imagine a better version of who we could have been. Someone who didn't make that mistake, someone who followed through, someone braver, kinder, more successful. But maybe those better versions don't exist to shame us. They exist to inspire us, to remind us that change is always possible, that the other you, the one who did take that leap, is still you. And the version of you that someone else longs to be, that's you too. If the multiverse holds infinite versions of you, then it also holds infinite chances, infinite ways of becoming. And while you may not be able to leap across dimensions to trade places with another self, you can choose here. Now you can carry the strength of those imagined paths forward into the present. You can live as though you already contain their wisdom, their courage, their calm. Because in a way, you do. And perhaps, on some quiet night, in a distant corner of the multiverse, another version of you is lying awake, wondering what it would have been like to be you, to have your joys, your scars, your memories, to know what it felt like to walk your path. Maybe they envy you, maybe they admire you, maybe they're just grateful you exist. So tonight, let yourself rest in that idea. You're not just one story, you're many. You're not alone, not in the cosmic sense and not even within yourself. You're a chorus of possibilities still unfolding, a soft flicker of light in a vast sky, singing quietly, endlessly into the dark, and somewhere, out there, the rest of you are listening. Let's begin not with a theory, but a thought. Imagine, far into the future, a civilization advanced enough to simulate entire worlds. Not just video games with beautiful landscapes or AI models of weather and traffic, but realities so complex, so detailed, that the people inside them believe themselves to be real. These simulated beings feel joy and fear. They build cities, fall in love, write poetry. They look up at their stars and wonder just like we do. Now ask yourself, if such simulations were possible, if they could be built, how many would exist? And more pressingly, how would the beings inside one know they were simulated? This is the question posed by philosopher Nick Bostrom in what's now called the simulation hypothesis. He offers a trilemma, 3 possibilities, all worth sitting with quietly. The first, no civilization ever reaches a level advanced enough to create such simulations. They self-destruct, or choose another path. The second, they do reach that level but choose never to simulate their ancestors, for ethical, cultural, or simply practical reasons. The third and most startling, they do reach that level, and they do run such simulations. And if so, the number of simulated minds may vastly outnumber biological ones, meaning, statistically, it's more likely we are simulated than not. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's not a horror story, it's a philosophical possibility, a way of asking what it means to exist when our senses can be fooled and our physics might be a program. And the curious thing is, physics sometimes behaves as though it's running on code. Our universe is not analog all the way down. At the smallest scales we can measure, the Planck length and Planck time, space and time appear to be quantized. That is, they come in discrete units, like pixels in a vast cosmic screen. Light, matter, even the fabric of space-time itself, all seem to operate not as smooth continuums, but in finite steps. That might be nothing, or it might be everything. Some physicists and information theorists have begun to wonder, what if the universe is fundamentally made not of particles or energy, or even space, but of information? That everything we see is just the visible surface of an underlying sea of bits, yeses and nos, ons and offs, woven into the architecture of reality. In such a view, atoms are not solid things, but arrangements of information that behave predictably according to encoded rules. Space is not an emptiness, but a structure. Time is not a river, but a clock cycle. And consciousness, what you are doing right now as you listen and imagine, is not an illusion, but a process running within a grand simulation. Of course, this doesn't mean that reality isn't real. It simply means that real may be defined not by what something is made of, but by how it behaves, how it unfolds, how it holds together under the weight of meaning. After all, we already build worlds ourselves. Every video game, every virtual model, every imagined story is a kind of simulation. And as our tools become more powerful, so do our creations. Entire weather systems, simulated cities with virtual traffic, digital creatures with neural networks that learn, adapt, even play. We're just beginning. So who's to say that someone, somewhere, somewhen, didn't begin much earlier? And if we are inside such a world, it raises a profound question. Not just, how would we know, but what would it mean? Would it make our lives less meaningful, less rich, or would it add another layer of wonder? After all, if this is a simulation, then the stars were placed with care. The constants of nature, so finely tuned that they allow for galaxies, water and breath, were chosen, or at least permitted. The beauty of sunrise, the rhythm of music, the taste of warmth on a winter day, all still yours, still real, still moving. In fact, the very idea that we might be simulated invites a strange kind of intimacy. Someone, or something, designed this place. Maybe not for you specifically, but with the possibility of you in mind. A reality flexible enough to allow your presence, your thoughts, your questions. And maybe that's all any of us ever want, to feel that we were not entirely random, that our lives are not accidents but patterns, that our joy and our pain ripple out into something larger, something that listens even if we never hear it speak. So tonight, consider the possibility, not as a fear but as a curiosity, that the universe might be a kind of song, a program, a dream running on a machine more ancient than stars, and in that dream you are here, wondering, breathing, alive. That's more than enough. You walk into a room and pause. Something feels off, though you can't explain why. Maybe it's the light, warmer than it should be. Maybe it's the sound of your own footsteps echoing too crisply. Maybe it's the way the book on the table is turned slightly, just enough to make you wonder if you've seen this exact moment before, and then a number flashes on a screen. 1111. You shrug it off. Coincidence. But an hour later, the same pattern appears again, and again, and again. Moments like this are often passed over with a soft laugh or a private shiver. A glitch in the matrix, we say, half joking, borrowing from a film where reality was nothing but a simulation. In that story, déjà vu signalled an error, an edit to the code. But in real life, there is no proof of such glitches. And yet, the feeling lingers, a subtle unease, a whisper in the back of the mind. What if? These oddities are not proof of anything sinister, but they do raise questions. Why do patterns sometimes repeat so perfectly that they catch our breath? Why do strangers finish our thoughts? Why do dreams anticipate conversations? Why do certain moments feel hollow, almost too symmetrical to be real? Psychologists explain much of this through pattern recognition, our brain's natural ability to seek order, even in chaos. We're wired to find connections, to notice symmetry, to assign meaning. Seeing repeating numbers, hearing a song at just the right moment, having a thought and then encountering it in the world, these things happen all the time, and most of the time we don't notice. But occasionally they arrive when we're listening closely, when we're quiet enough inside to feel the pattern. These are not glitches in the technical sense, but they are interruptions, soft breaks in the rhythm of experience. They draw attention to the scaffolding of reality. They invite reflection, and perhaps that's the point. Not to reveal a secret code, but to remind us that we live in a reality rich with poetic texture. Because when we call these things glitches, we're not always speaking literally, we're using metaphor. A way to describe that eerie feeling that something is watching, not from behind a curtain, but from inside the story itself. Imagine for a moment that this world is a simulation, not mechanical and cold, but delicate, intentional, filled with beauty. A dream built not from zeros and ones, but from language, emotion, memory. And in that dream, perhaps the glitches are not errors but brushstrokes, signals, fleeting reminders that what we're experiencing is not just random, not just accidental, that there is an artistry to it all. Some people describe events so perfectly timed that they defy belief. A car breaking down seconds before an accident up ahead, a lost object returning without explanation, an illness vanishing the night before surgery. Most of these can be explained or dismissed, but some defy both logic and skepticism. They hover at the edge of the real, like mist at the edge of a forest. Not proof, but presence. In religious traditions, these moments are sometimes called signs. In art, they're called motifs. In dreams, they're called symbols. In code, they're anomalies. But in all cases, they serve the same function. They disturb the expected gently to reveal something deeper. Even science, cautious and slow to speculate, has its own encounters with mystery, experiments that behave differently when observed, particles that seem to know what's coming, constants that remain too finely tuned to be coincidence, yet offer no explanation. These aren't glitches, but they are invitations, gaps in certainty, soft spots in the code. So what do we do with this? We notice. We don't chase them down, but we stay open. When a moment feels strange, we allow it. We don't force meaning onto it, but we don't look away. Like a painter stepping back from the canvas, we let the brushstrokes speak without rushing to explain. And perhaps that's the most powerful thing we can do. Not demand answers, but hold the questions with gentleness. Let synchronicity be synchronicity. Let the oddness of the world remain slightly tilted, because in that tilt we find poetry, we find presence. If you've ever walked a path and suddenly felt you were being watched, not in fear but in awareness, then you felt this. If you've ever thought of someone, only to receive their message moments later, you've touched it. If you've ever woken from a dream with the feeling that something real just happened, something you can't quite name, then you've already crossed into the territory where glitches become metaphors and metaphors become mirrors. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, let your mind wander. Let the strange moments of your life drift back, not to solve them, but to savor them. That time the lights flickered just as you felt a decision settle. That phone call that came out of nowhere. That story you heard twice in one day from different mouths. They may mean nothing, but they are yours. Little echoes, little folds in the fabric, not cracks, not flaws. Just reminders that the world, for all its laws and logic, still knows how to surprise us. And maybe that's what matters most. Not whether we're in a simulation, but that even inside one, wonder still finds a way in. If we allow ourselves, just for a little while, to accept the premise that this world may be a kind of simulation, a carefully tuned stage built from rules and light and pattern, then the question gently unfolds. Who built it, and why? Not with fear, not with urgency, but with the same quiet curiosity you might feel while staring into a starry sky and wondering who else might be looking back. The idea of simulators, those who might have created this universe, isn't new. It echoes in old myths, in religious traditions, in philosophical musings that stretch back centuries. Gods crafting humans from clay, spirits dreaming the world into being, great minds painting reality with thought. In many stories, we've always imagined that someone or something came before us, not to control, but to understand. In the modern framing, the simulator might not be a god in the traditional sense. It might be a being from another universe, a civilization far older than our own, or even a future version of humanity, curious, reflective, reaching back through time to recreate their past and understand how they came to be. Like a historian building a model city, or a child rewatching old home videos, they may not intend to interfere. They might just be watching, remembering, learning. And perhaps, in building this simulation, they weren't trying to deceive anyone. Perhaps their intention wasn't perfection or precision, but exploration. Maybe they wanted to see how kindness emerges, how love endures, how a single life ripples outward, touching others in ways that can't be predicted by code. If you had the ability to simulate an entire universe, one with art and laughter, with oceans and dreams, wouldn't you do it not just to observe, but to feel something you'd forgotten, to experience beauty as if it were new again? And here's a more delicate question. If you lived in a world you knew was simulated, would that change how you lived? Some might say yes. They'd see their life as fiction, their choices as meaningless, their relationships as scripted. But others, perhaps most of us, would come to see the opposite. If the world is made, then it was made with intention. If it was made with intention, then it has weight, meaning, purpose, not dictated from above, but discovered from within. Because even in a story, the feelings are real, the tears are real, the questions are real. Ask any actor on a stage whether the emotions they feel during a performance are false, and they'll tell you the stage might be pretend, but the ache in their chest is not. And if you've ever cried while reading a novel or listening to a piece of music, you already know what that means. We live inside stories all the time. Some are written by others, some we write ourselves. But the truth is not lost just because the setting was built. Perhaps the simulators, whoever they are, wanted to understand something they couldn't experience directly. What it means to make a sacrifice, to forgive someone, to sing in a language you invented as a child, to stand at the edge of the sea and feel small and important at the same time. Maybe they wanted to know what it's like to fear death, to fall in love, to wonder if you're enough, because no matter how advanced you become, some things cannot be calculated. They must be felt, lived, lost, found again. If you are the product of a simulation, then you are also part of its design. You are chosen or allowed to exist in this particular configuration of time and matter and motion. And with that existence comes a kind of gentle responsibility, to notice, to care, to reach. Not because someone is watching, but because you are here, and you can. And what happens after? What if, when this life ends, you awaken not in a bright light, but in a quiet room, a space outside the simulation? What if someone is sitting beside you smiling kindly and says, "You did well, tell me what it was like." And you sit there for a long time, telling them everything. The taste of strawberries, the sound of wind in the trees, the moment you held someone's hand and knew you were safe, the time you were wrong and didn't know how to apologize, the feeling of listening to the rain and finally understanding something you couldn't put into words, and they listen. Because that's why they made the world in the first place, to hear you tell it back. That's only a story, of course, a soft imagining. But maybe that's all the more reason to treat this life, simulated or not, as something precious. Because in the end, what matters isn't who built the world or why. It's what you do with the time you're given, the kindness you extend, the love you carry, the curiosity you protect like a candle in the dark. If there are simulators, they are not gods, they are not monsters, they are storytellers. And so are you. Tonight, let that be enough. You are part of something vast and mysterious, but also something gentle, something that listens. And whether this world is real or made, it is yours. Every breath, every question, every quiet miracle. Let's imagine, just for a moment, that it happens, that somewhere, in a forest clearing beneath the ocean, or hovering quietly above a distant hill, a portal opens, not loudly, not with flashing lights or roaring winds, but softly, almost politely, as if the fabric of reality simply decided to blink, a gentle shimmer, a fold in the air, a quiet invitation. What would we do? The first instinct for many might be wonder. Curiosity would stir like wind in tall grass. Scientists would arrive with instruments, journalists with cameras, explorers with questions, and yes, others, too, those with less patient intentions. There would be theories, fears, dreams, 1,000 different meanings projected onto something that, in truth, might not be ready to tell us anything at all. The idea of a portal, an opening into another world, carries with it more than science. It brings story, it brings history, and not all of that history is gentle. Throughout human time, the moment we found a new land or unfamiliar people, we often treated them not as neighbours to be met, but as resources to be mined. Cultures were displaced, worlds were redrawn, all under the flag of discovery. So if a door truly opened, not to another country or continent, but to another reality, we would need to ask ourselves hard questions before stepping through. Would we go as guests or as conquerors? Would we listen before speaking? Would we look for beauty or for value? Would we, in our eagerness to explore, remember to ask whether we are even welcome? These questions aren't meant to cast shadows on the idea of discovery. Curiosity is one of the gentlest and most noble parts of being human. The desire to know, to connect, to step into the unknown. That's how we grow. But when it comes to crossing into a world not our own, curiosity must walk beside humility. Not every door needs to be opened. Not every place needs us in it. Of course, it's also possible that a portal might not lead to a world with life at all. It might open onto a barren landscape, a vacuum, a dimension so alien that our senses can't comprehend it. A world where time spirals sideways, where matter behaves like thought, where up and down lose meaning. And even in such strangeness, we might feel the pull to stay, not to exploit, but to witness. What if we saw colours our eyes weren't meant to see? What if we felt emotions that don't exist here? What if we heard the silence between stars and understood it, not as emptiness, but as presence? In stories, portals often arrive as tests, not of strength, but of readiness. They ask, are you prepared to change? To let go of what you thought you knew? To carry with you only what matters and leave behind what doesn't? And sometimes we imagine what might come through the portal, not us stepping into their world, but something from their side crossing into ours. The fear is understandable. We imagine invasion, contamination, loss of control. But what if what emerged wasn't dangerous but disoriented? Not a monster, but a wanderer. Not a threat, but a visitor, looking at us with the same trembling wonder with which we looked at them. First contact in any form is not just a scientific milestone, it's an emotional one. It means we are not alone. It means that consciousness is not unique to this small corner of a single universe. It means that the questions we ask at night, the ones we thought belonged only to us, are being whispered, perhaps in languages we'll never hear, in hearts we'll never meet. Would we understand each other? Would we know how to communicate? Or would the moment pass like a dream, real but unreachable? Maybe the portal would close again before we could act. Or maybe it would stay open, quiet and patient, waiting for us to decide not how to go forward, but whether we should. And perhaps that's the real gift of such a vision. Not the crossing itself, but the pause it creates, the questions it stirs, the awareness that there is more, and that more carries both promise and responsibility. Because a portal doesn't need to be physical. It can be a moment, a conversation, a realization, a turning point in your own life where the world shifts just slightly, and you see things not as they are, but as they might be. That too is a crossing. So tonight, if you close your eyes and imagine a soft doorway in the distance, light spilling from its edges, beckoning gently, don't rush to step through. Sit by it. Listen. Ask what kind of person you would become on the other side, and what you would take with you. Maybe that's all the portal was ever asking. Close your eyes for a moment and let your thoughts drift. Just as they do when sleep begins to arrive, gently, like mist pooling at the edge of a still lake, you feel your body soften. The world grows quiet. Somewhere, beneath the chatter of consciousness, another kind of awareness begins to stir. Not logical, not linear, but vivid, shifting, deeply familiar, yet entirely strange. You are dreaming. And within that dream, time folds, space melts. You might find yourself walking through a childhood home, only to open a door and step into a city you've never seen. A long-lost friend appears beside you, unchanged, as if no time has passed. Words are spoken without sound. Emotions take on shape and colour. The laws of physics vanish, but meaning remains. We often treat dreams as shadows, as echoes of waking life, strange side effects of memory and rest. But what if dreams are more than byproducts? What if they are bridges? Lucid dreamers, those rare and practiced minds who become aware within the dream itself, tell stories of flying, of bending gravity, of stepping through shimmering doors that led to entire worlds. Not just surreal nonsense, but detailed, coherent landscapes, conversations with people they had never met, cities with consistent architecture, laws of motion unique to those inner places. Some call this lucid dreaming. Others speak of astral projection, of travelling beyond the body. Still others describe hypnagogic states, the moments just before sleep, when the mind begins to dissolve and reassemble, forming tunnels of thought that feel both outside and within. Science, of course, approaches these phenomena with caution. The brain is astonishingly powerful. It can simulate entire environments, map emotional states into images, and replace sensory fragments in patterns we don't consciously understand. But even within that framework, the experience itself remains mysterious. Why do certain dreams feel so much more real than waking life? Why do we sometimes wake with the feeling that we've returned? Not from a fiction, but from somewhere else. Some cultures have long believed that the dream world is not less real, but more. That what we call the physical realm is just one layer, and sleep is how we touch the others. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia speak of dream time, a sacred space where ancestors walk and stories live. In Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga is practiced as a way to understand the nature of the mind, and ultimately reality itself. These aren't metaphors, they're maps. And perhaps in the context of a multiverse or a simulated world, they become even more intriguing. If consciousness is not confined to the body, and if realities beyond this one truly exist, then dreams may be more than personal theatres. There may be windows, portals not of space, but of self. A moment where the simulation loosens, where the rules soften, and where we wander freely between branches of what could have been. Have you ever had a dream so vivid that waking felt like forgetting? Or dreamed of a place so detailed you were sure it must exist somewhere? Or spoken to someone in a dream, only to carry the weight of that conversation with you all day, as though something true had passed between you? Maybe these are just tricks of the brain, or maybe they're crossings, small, safe ways for the mind to explore adjacent timelines, neighbouring realities, echoes of what might have happened if one choice, one moment, had turned slightly to the left. And perhaps most curiously, these dream portals don't always open in sleep. Sometimes they arrive in the middle of the day. You're walking to the kitchen and suddenly forget where you were going. You stare out the window and feel yourself drifting, not thinking, not remembering, just being elsewhere for a heartbeat or two. You return, of course, but something in you has shifted. a sense that you were, for just a moment, touching the edge of something larger. Maybe the world is built to allow these little moments. Maybe consciousness, when untethered from routine, reaches out like a vine, feeling along the edges of what is permitted. And maybe the rules allow for that. Not full travel, but glimpses, flashes, dreamt echoes of real places, or perhaps real echoes of dreamt ones. Whatever they are, dreams carry weight. Not because they are predictive or prophetic, but because they are yours, formed by your thoughts, your fears, your memory, and maybe, just maybe, by your other selves, reaching back across the veil to say, I remember you. Tonight, as you fall asleep, try not to rush. Linger in the moment when your mind begins to shift, that soft space where time thins and sound becomes distant. Let it carry you, not with expectation, but with openness. The world behind your eyelids may be stitched from your own mind, but it may also carry the texture of elsewhere. Walk slowly through it. Speak kindly to those you meet. Notice the colour of the sky, the feel of the ground beneath your feet. And when you return, don't try too hard to explain. Just remember that, for a time, you walked through a portal no one else could see, and you brought something back. There's a moment many people describe, just at the edge of death, when the body has begun to quiet, when breath has slowed, and when the room itself seems to take on a softer light. Sometimes it comes during illness, sometimes in accidents, sometimes only in stories passed down. But the details echo: a tunnel, a light, a feeling of rising, a presence just beyond reach, a sense of being both held and released, as though something important, something real, is changing, but not ending. We do not know what death is, not really. We can measure the signs, the slowing heartbeat, the still breath, the fading electrical pulses in the brain, but these are surface observations. What we do not yet understand is the subjective experience of that final threshold. What does it feel like to die? And what, if anything, comes next? Science, ever careful, can say only so much. But philosophy, poetry, and quiet reflection have tried for millennia to fill that silence. And in recent decades, those who have brushed up against death and returned, people who have flatlined and been revived, have added their voices to the mystery. Many speak of that tunnel, that light, of meeting loved ones long gone, of music with no sound, of a love so complete it defies explanation. Some describe seeing their lives flash before them, not as a replay, but as a simultaneous unfolding, all moments visible at once, a panoramic self. Skeptics offer explanations rooted in neurochemistry. The brain, deprived of oxygen, may release powerful chemicals that create hallucinations. The tunnel may be a trick of dying visual cortex. The presence, a final echo of memory and longing. These may be true. And yet, even within those explanations, there is something to be said for what the experience feels like. Not chaotic, not random, but often deeply peaceful, as though some inner part of the self has prepared for this all along. In many cultures, death is not seen as a wall, but as a door. Not a deletion, but a transition. The body, yes, may end, but the awareness, the thing that noticed the sunset, that laughed at jokes, that wandered in the dark, may shift elsewhere, not vanish, but continue, in a form we cannot yet perceive. Some imagine this as heaven, others as reincarnation. Some believe in merging with a collective consciousness. Others imagine becoming part of the very fabric of space itself, a drop of light returning to the great ocean. In the context of the multiverse, or a simulated reality, death may be imagined differently still. If consciousness is not bound to the body, and if reality is made of patterns and information, then perhaps what we call death is a transfer, not a deletion, a soft shift in frequency, a changing of channels, the same melody played in a different key. Imagine your life as a radio signal, clear and strong, moving through the air. And then gradually that signal begins to fade, not because it ends, but because it begins to resonate on a different wavelength, one just beyond the hearing of this world, and perhaps in that other place someone else hears it rising. A voice emerging from static, a story just beginning. It is a tender thought, not a certainty, not a doctrine, but a way of softening the hardest part of being alive, that it must one day stop. And what of grief? What of the quiet, sharp ache left behind when someone we love crosses through that door? Perhaps that ache is not emptiness, but resonance. The way a bell keeps humming even after it has been struck. The way a voice stays in a room long after it's gone. Love does not end. It echoes. It changes shape. It becomes memory, presence, sensation. A warmth in the chest when we hear a certain song. A tear that comes unbidden when we see a certain smile in a stranger. The dead are not gone. They are simply no longer bound to the narrow corridor of time in which we walk. Some traditions speak of death as a return, others as a continuation. But nearly all see it not as a punishment, but as part of the larger rhythm of things, like night following day, like sleep following thought, like silence after a song. And perhaps that's the most comforting idea of all, that death is not an interruption, but a transformation, that what you are, beneath the skin, beneath the thoughts, is not lost, but released, set free to move through dimensions we cannot name, to join a version of yourself that already waits, patiently, somewhere just beyond. Tonight, as you close your eyes, think not of endings, but of crossings. Think of a bridge in fog, of a door slowly swinging open in a warm-lit room, of the gentle hand that guides you not away, but forward. Wherever forward may be, you are not falling, you are being carried, and the thread of you, the quiet presence at your core, it does not fray, it does not break, it only changes its weaving and continues on. You've walked with us now through many worlds, across theories and thresholds, across dreams and dimensions, across the strange edges of what might be. We've looked up at a sky that may not be the only one. We've drifted through portals, met alternate versions of ourselves, and wondered, quietly, honestly, what it means to be real. And now we are here, not the end, but at a place of stillness, a moment to rest, a space to breathe. Because even in a universe of infinite variations, of tangled timelines and layered realities, there is still this, you right now, listening, breathing, wondering, not as a theory or a pattern, but as a presence, and that presence is enough. Let's think, one more time, about the self, about you, not the name on your documents or the voice in your head, not the job or the title or even the body, but the awareness behind it, the part of you that has watched silently through all the moments, good and hard, loud and still. The you that remembers the weight of a friend's hug, the feel of grass on bare feet, the hush that falls before the first snowfall, the you that was there before words arrived, and the you that will remain when they fall away. Now, imagine that this self, the quiet core of who you are, doesn't exist in just one place. Imagine it stretched across realities like light filtered through glass. In one world, you took the leap. In another, you held back. In one, you said yes. In another, no. And in all of them, that same observing self is there, softly witnessing the choices unfold. It's not a matter of belief or physics. It's a feeling, a possibility, a poetic truth. Because if time is not as linear as it seems, if every moment contains the seeds of many others, then perhaps you are already everywhere you might be. already unfolding in every possible direction, already whole, even in your becoming. You are the child and the elder, the question and the answer, the singer and the silence. And if the universe is a story, a slow, vast, unfinished story, then you're both its reader and its page, not its hero, not its villain. Just one quiet voice in a chorus of stars humming softly into the dark. That's the truth so many stories forget. That meaning isn't in victory, or certainty, or answers. It's in presence. It's in staying with the question, even when it bends and shifts. It's in noticing the way light falls through a window, or how laughter sounds when shared by someone you love. It's in forgiving yourself, in holding space for wonder. If the multiverse is real, and you exist in 1,000 variations, then none of them are alone. They're part of the same thread, the same fabric, the same song. And maybe, just maybe, some part of you already knows this. In dreams, in déjà vu, in that strange, unplaceable feeling that you've done this before. Not here, maybe, but somewhere. As if your soul remembers something your mind has never learned. So tonight, let yourself drift. Not with worry, not with pressure, but with the gentle knowing that you are not falling. You are floating. You are being carried as if by a soft current that knows the way, through possibilities, through portals, through silence. And when you sleep, if you dream, let it be a dream of elsewhere, a room with 2 suns, a version of you who sings without fear, a memory you haven't made yet, a truth waiting patiently to be discovered. Because wherever you are, in this universe or another, in this moment or the next, you are already part of something larger, something that listens, something that lingers, something that loves. And so, dear traveller of thoughts and timelines, sleep now. You've journeyed far. You've asked beautiful questions. You've imagined impossible things. And now, there's nothing more to do. Just rest. You're already everywhere you need to be.